There's probably a lot of risk factors that you need to take into account, like anywhere. Naturally, the flooding are issues near certain parts of the rivers, canal systems. There's a lot of low-lying mainland and a lot of greenscape. So those are untouchable areas.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. Thank you for joining us today, and super excited to be going north of the border today, up into the Gold Coast. In the studio today with Tony Coughran. Thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Chris.
Tony, we've known each other for some time. We did one of these a few years ago when I was going to launch this, so I appreciate you doing this for a second time. We're here today, and obviously we're going to be talking about the Gold Coast, and I know you and I know your business and clients have worked with your team over the years. Let's delve a little bit deeper into your backstory, when you started as a buyer's agent, when that was, what were you doing just before you became a buyer's agent?
Absolutely. I've been quite passionate about property since a young age, and I guess that's been instilled in me from my parents who have built, owned, invested, sold and kept some commercial premises across their journey. And it inspired me to talk to a valuer that was valuing one of their properties. And there's only one university course that I was going to do, and that was a property valuation degree at University of Queensland. So that was great. Every Wednesday, I'd turn up to the Queensland Government State Valuation Service and donate my Wednesday for some work experience. So that also helped. In fact, concreted me getting a job with the Queensland Government. And that was a great learning experience, a great apprenticeship, and learned a lot from the guys and girls there at the State Valuation Service. So thank you. Then moved on to work for a national valuation firm on the Gold Coast, working for banks and brokers and valuing for mortgage securities. That was awesome to value thousands of properties across the Gold Coast, and it's really beneficial for my buying journey as well. If I cast my mind back to when I was 22, I was very fortunate to hold down 3 jobs at the time, worked really hard and saved up for a deposit, like so many are these days. So I can relate to you guys out there that are wanting to get into the market. So yeah, I bought a little 2-bedroom renovator in Sherwood just before Woolworths started to develop in the Sherwood Village. And within 5 years, I saw the property value triple. So that was a really good springboard into my journey. I bought the property next door and then, so on and so on. So seeing firsthand that buying smart and the powers in the buying really creates that wealth and the long-term games. Like seeing people pay too much for properties before, during and after the GFC was a real eye-opener for me. And I was thinking, who is guiding these people? And it was the selling agents, of course, helping the buyers make the decision and guide them. And they were paying too much. There's a value I could see that driven past 5 opportunities to pay too much for another. So I said, enough's enough. I said to my wife, let's start our own buyer's agency and start helping the poor buyers. So in 2010, Simply Gold Coast was born. We want to make property decisions safer, smarter and simpler for our clients.
Yeah, I'm just looking at you on LinkedIn here, to be honest. In 2000, I think you started as a property valuer. So, you've been in the sort of Gold Coast sort of market for 25 years. And I think obviously a lot of buyer's agents come from different backgrounds, and there's no right or wrong the way to get in. There's all usually, whether it's corporate learning or whether it's, you're a lawyer or whether you're an agent, there's lots of learnings. But what do you reckon, teaching you as a valuer, what do you reckon that taught you and gives you a bit of an edge today? Because like you said, you would have seen hundreds, if not thousands of properties over, say 8 years as an valuer. And you must get a lot of learnings because you're doing a lot of, not just market analysis, but you're doing an individual property to property analysis and seeing the differences, having to really question it.
Yeah, I guess you get to see a whole array of properties across the Gold Coast and see how different markets work. Every personality has its personality. Then you've got micro sections of that market. I call them sub-market areas that, are better than others. Sub-market areas are going to outperform a postcode every day of the week. So buying on the right side of the ledger is always a great thing, and it feels good just to know the fundamentals of what people want. And look, I'm a big believer in paying just a little bit more to get a lot more back, just to get in that better suburb. Is it to get that extra bedroom or bathroom or get that vista of view, or what is it? Is it the biggest block in the street or the suburb? What is that difference? So just all of these, there's so many moving parts, Chris, with valuations, but it's good to understand, even now as a buyer's agent, understanding how minds tick, how they're motivated, what they're chasing, what they want, so that our clients, when they're buying a property for the long haul, they're going to have an asset that's going to go up, through the goodness of time and reward them well.
When you started, say 2010, I doubt there would have been many buyers agents up there. I mean, there's always the investment ones probably popping up their head, and we white super grade selling off the plan back in the day, but maybe not so much nowadays. But genuine sort of buyers agents working on the Gold Coast, helping a lot of home buyers and investors, but, local specialists. I mean, there were probably very few back then and probably still not that many today, really.
Yeah, it was like getting the machete out and paving the way through the field and, educating, the buyers, the sellers, the agents, everybody. It felt like you're out there trying to just prove yourself and prove your worth and the value. And little by little, it's caught on. And now there's all sorts of TV shows about buyer's agency, and a lot of buyer's agents are popping up now. But, we really, really enjoy helping our clients and embrace them in the street. We don't have to run the other way on the other side of the street. We're high-fiving them and, giving them man and lady hugs, and it's good. It feels good to help people in the industry.
I mean, obviously you've got people who are growing up in the Gold Coast as clients, people who maybe moved there 5-10 years ago and they've got a good grasp of how the Gold Coast works. But if you're going to have to break the Gold Coast down into different pockets, if someone new to the Gold Coast, how would you break it down in terms of the different markets and what people want in different markets?
Yeah, I'll start off on a broader scale and then kind of narrow it in. So the Gold Coast is a linear city. It runs from the beach to the bush or the mountains, not out from the CBD. We generally cover on the border of Queensland at Coolangatta to the south, up to Ormo, Pimpama to the north, and then west to Tellabudgera Valley and Mount Tamborine. But, our core focus is where people want to be, and that's along the coastal stretch of the beaches and the broadwaters, typically 15 kilometres inland of the coastline. You've got all sorts of little villages and communities across the coast, Palm Beach, Currumbin, Burleigh, awesome places, through the northern canals of Runaway Bay, Hope Island, Saintfiet Cove. We love extending out west of the M1 as well to the hinterland, and for the rural lovers, for Tallow, Benogan, Mount Tamborine. But they're all big suburbs and there's better spots than others. Each has its own micro market with unique drivers. Just having that local knowledge of the infrastructure, school catchments, it just all does help. And having relationships across the board in every corner with the agents over the last 15, 16 years has been phenomenal. And, we don't take that lightly. We're very protective of the agents as well and the secrets that they share with us. So it's great. If you want to break it down again, we've got a broad, like a waterfront market. You've got your rivers, and Cooma River, a whole host of canal frontages, not that they're making them anymore. You've got narrow water frontages, wide water frontages, ones that narrow in, expand out. You've got the southern waterfronts that are, more relaxed and near the beach, but you don't get to go out to the seaway in any way, shape or form, but you get access to Tellabudgera and Currumbin creeks. Up the northern end, that's where the serious boaties are, Chris. The likes of Holywell, Runaway Bay, Paradise Point, Hope Island, Saintfiet Cove. There's some, great boating communities. You have a number of bridges that you need to get through if you're prepared to pay the money, and it's worth it. Bridge free. Waterfronts always going up in value. And then, mate, you hit the beachfront market. You've got your main beach at the northern end of the beach run, feeding off the Tedder Avenue precinct, which is alive and well and very popular. You've got Broad Beach on the other side of Silver's Paradise, Mermaid Beach, home to the very rare beachfront homes on Hedges and Albatross, the Burleigh Esplanade and Goodwin Terrace sections where you're walking to James Street is such another lifestyle. These are all prestige and scare properties, and when the good ones come up, you need to jump on them. And then, mate, again, you've got the acreage and hinterlands. So, travelling from Tallabudra, Benogan, Mount Tambourine, and everything in between. People want their privacy and aspect. If you're buying an acreage, you don't want a house that's right on the road because, you've got all this land. You want to be, nice and private and, secluded. And then don't forget our apartment market. That is huge. I think there's over 68 trains in the air right now, and there's an absolute rapid growth for downsizers, the ones that want to lock and leave, and those professionals who want to be in amongst the action. And you get the interstate buyers that want a foot in each camp so that they come up and visit the Gold Coast and they get time. And there's a building versus the residential only buildings. Everywhere you look, there's different key drivers and things that you probably should be aware of if you want to invest your hard-earned dollars. So yeah, it's like a patchwork of different lifestyles, mate.
Well, that's what I think when I look at the Gold Coast, right? So you've got your hinterland, your escarpment, which sort of limits the supply. And then you say you lose half the land because it's a real coastal market, right? So you're operating on a very small band of land that people want. Then you add in all the bridges, and then which makes it hard to get around. And then you add in all the canals and the waterways, etc. And it becomes like this mismatch of like spaghetti little postcodes, right? And suburbs. And we go up the Gold Coast every year, to be honest. We have in the last few years just with such a good life with young kids. Like it's just, you can spend a week there and, it's a real good, relaxing place to go. And yeah, and there's just obviously the light rail and like you say, so many developments going on as well, which it's changing the market. I mean, where do people go wrong though? Because I feel like you could easily get it wrong. Like you say, buying too close to the busy road, maybe it's, parts of the suburb that are really hard and gets a lot of cut through traffic because traffic seems to can be quite an issue if you're in the wrong pocket. So, what's some of the big mistakes you find when interstate buyers look at the Gold Coast market and they maybe get into a pocket they shouldn't have?
There's probably a lot of risk factors that you need to take into account, like anywhere. Naturally, the flooding are issues, near certain parts of the rivers, canal systems. There's a lot of low-lying mainland and a lot of greenscape. So those are untouchable areas. They'll never be developed. So that really makes the land even more scarce on the Gold Coast, which is why the market keeps moving, northbound. It's just understanding the maps. And we've got property that are in a blue zone, but it's never, ever flooded. So that could be a little trap itself in reverse because people don't understand that, it's in a blue zone, we can't go near it. But if you dig deeper, you'll find that Dave and Betty, who built the house in 1974, have never flooded. So it's an interesting one. Look, you've always got to be careful of the insurance, the rising premiums and things like that. We turned away a property a couple of weeks ago because the duplex didn't have flood insurance. So we ended up buying a much better property with flood insurance and very happy camper. But things that you don't think about might be with your waterfronts, the revettment walls. Once you're an owner, you are responsible for that revettment wall, and the council are making you responsible for the maintenance of that. There's parts of, say, Chevron Island that have got revettment walls that are disgraceful and they're falling in and, it's a big minefield and trap. You might think you'd be buying a great opportunity and it might be cheap for a reason. The coastal exposure to the air, you just have to be aware of that. We love the ocean, but you do need to, keep on top of the maintenance and the construction of the metals and the windows, etc. But also keep an eye on the body corporate health. Is a sinking fund? Does it have enough in the fund to, repaint the building when it's due? Just a heap of those things. Again, you get what you pay for. So you need to know what to look for and do all your checks and balances. Noise and traffic, we love having the Coolangatta Airport, but it does have some noise attributes. The M1, of course, the new Coomera connector, the M9, that's going to be open up in no time. Those kinds of things. Yes, they benefit the city as a whole, but you want to, just keep enough distance away from them as well. Zoning changes and people buying units, protect your own view corridors. Again, in reverse, the local knowledge, you might think building might be built out, but in fact, that body corporate or owners within that building have actually invested in a couple of little units door so that they do protect their own views. So just having that insider information kind of helps. And Asbestos is one too, like a lot of homes were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, claiming those prime positions. So just be aware of those. If you're going to knock the home down, it's going to cost a little bit extra. Look, subsidence, there are some issues across the Gold Coast. You need to know where to look. There's a couple of areas in Currumbin to keep your eye on. Wonga Wallen, there was a massive slippage out there and one of a very good street address. So, yeah, it's just handy to know those kind of little trip hazards.
You sort of highlighted a few points there around, obviously, the airport. That's pretty amazing too. It's a pretty solid airport, right? As well, you can get anywhere in Australia and even go overseas by it, right? That's not just a tiny little airport. And obviously access to as the Brisbane market is sort of pretty just down the road, and the roads are getting better, right? Like, how is this sort of the fly in, fly out, sort of the drive in, drive out, sort of affecting the Gold Coast market? Does it open up a lot of extra buyer pools that can sort of have either second homes or have their family home in the Gold Coast? And how is that shifting post-COVID?
Yeah, it's awesome to have access to two airports, Brisbane down the road there and then Coolangatta. So, yeah, people do like to fly in and, go to a holiday home. It's close by. So it's not really a necessary evil, but it is, it's fantastic to have the airport and you wouldn't have it any other way. If anything, it kind of opens up some areas where you can buy closer to the beach without paying the absolute premium as well. So there's always an upside. And yes, you do find that there are fly-in, fly-outs that love calling the Gold Coast home. They work so hard for their money. They travel, they're away from their families. They deserve everything that they get. And, they can fly in and fly out quite easily from the Gold Coast, and connecting flights even all the way over to Bustleton and Perth is phenomenal too. So you can get there within 4 hours if you want to.
So the Gold Coast market's obviously gentrified with buyers agents, but, obviously when there's an agent gets a call, there's one that's been doing it for 2 minutes and there's one that's been doing it for 20 years like you. So how does that help you, I guess, when you're looking at sort of properties for clients and being a sort of a good, safe pair of hands for agents to sort of give Tony and the team a call?
Yeah, look, we take our relationships very seriously with our Gold Coast agents. They've been phenomenal. I've had relationships before we started the buyer's agency back in my valuation world for the decade previous to that. And, I really enjoy working with 95% of them. Brilliant human beings. They're there to help. Trust has been an absolute phenomenal, point of difference for us because we do hold a lot of secrets. They do know that we're protective of them. We're not going to go door knock on their listing that they've just told us about. We're not going to share it with the other agents, and the other agents know that as well. So there's that mutual respect. And when we walk in the door with a client, it's a whole new world for our clients because you get really taken notice of and taken seriously. And, they'll probably pull us over into a corner and just say, hey, we've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks' time. This one, I know that you're probably going to, point out that it's not the most functional floor plan on this occasion, or the photography's got away on us. So, yeah, just getting those secrets is, just an awesome leverage.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. They want to be careful who they show these properties to, because the last thing they want is other agents sniffing all over their off-market or pre-market. And you're right. It's got to be professional, long-standing, and that takes time building trust with that. I mean, how do the Gold Coast agents sort of, every market works different, and even with every different market, agents work different. But how does sort of negotiating in the market, and particularly as you've seen the market in different cycles, I think that's experience is one thing of actually helping clients, but, seeing client outcomes and tracking property, like you said, all the way back to the GFC, you probably saw another downturn, another boom, and then another period through COVID. Like, how has the Gold Coast evolved, and how does that really help you when you're sort of trying to come up with pricing properties and negotiating?
Yeah, well, it just depends on what cycle, you're in, any market, So, back in 2012, we were getting away with murder, I was bidding against myself at auctions, knowing that a duplex pair was worth 600 every day of the week, and you'd bid yourself up to 550, knowing you've got a deal, great deal anyways. The agents asking you to come to these inspections or be at least a registered bidder, and knowing that we could get away with some really good wins. And if you didn't have that confidence in knowing what the values are and where they're going to, there'd be a lot of people that would have missed out on a lot of equity. Agents at the moment, they tend to have the upper hand because it is a seller's market. So in weaker markets, the agents know that you respectfully have the upper hand. And it's interesting. I look back on some of the record negotiations. There was one particular property in Clear Island Waters, north of water, amazing property. In this market, it'd sell in 24 hours. I got to negotiate that over a 6-week period, can you believe it or not? and we got the property down another 100 grand, and a client's super happy. They still own the property and they're using that equity to buy lots of other assets. And then you've got other really well-respected agents that have been in the business 30 years, and we still laugh about it. But back in the day when you had a contract and you had to go backwards and forwards and drive from one place to the next to get the buyer and the seller to, meet in the middle, 14 counter offers. So I don't think I'm going to ever beat that in my career from now.
Obviously, the value added in the relationships with the agents, and that takes time, knowing the Gold Coast market for 20, 25 years and all those client stories and the learnings you would have had. I mean, where do you see though, looking at your role with clients, where do you see the biggest value you add to clients beyond the sort of the sourcing and the negotiation? Like, where are some of the intangibles or the things you think their clients at the end of the journey goes, thanks so much, Tony. Like you really added a lot of value in this part of the conversation.
Being upfront and honest and being on their side. We take our clients under our wing and we spend their money like it's our own. So pointing them in the right direction and just giving them that confidence to know that they should pay a little bit more to get into that suburb because it's going to pay them dividends. And there's no use buying a property as a stepping stone for 1 or 2 years. You may as well just pay a little bit extra, get into that home that you're going to love and adore for the next 7 to 10 years. Or if you're a first home buyer, buy an asset that gets you into the market and then use that as an investment tool to rent that out for a great return, and then buy your next home, or if you settle down and have kids, buy the freestanding home. So I think giving guidance is a big one, and insulating our clients from the agents is a massive factor. Like there's been instances where I've said to one of my clients, I said, I'm sorry, Kelly, but you have to stay in the car down the road because you are so emotional. They'll read straight through this and you'll be paying $80,000 more before you know it. So, yeah, Matt and I turned up at the auction and played poker face, and you walk out of the auction room and play all these games and get a great result. Then the emotions can fly and true joys of tears happen. So there's just so many moving parts to that question, and it's a real buzz to get to the end and see light at the end of the tunnel, because it can be a frustrating time for a lot of buyers. A lot of stress, and you only get one chance, really. You don't want to make a mistake on the biggest asset you'll own.
Yeah, something I've just picked up on just talking to you there is just your appetite to really focus on the financial outcome there and the lifestyle outcome of making sure you get something that really is going to work for them. And I'm very similar philosophy with clients. It's, you can basically go down a certain budget price and go, I'm going to buy it for X price, and I'm just going to go buy the best asset for that. But often there's a benefit of maybe even just spending a little bit more past what you think is comfortable, like you say, to get that extra, something a bit wow, something a bit special, something that gives you a longer runway, a better investment. And, you've got to kind of act as a trusted advisor for them and educate them and spend time and encourage them and give them confidence to make that decision. And it sounds like you do that, which is awesome. Insulating yourself from agents. I've worked with buyer's agents quite a few times now, and they always say you're useless at this, Chris, because I'm too friendly with the agent. I tell them too much, they can read me like too easily. And so, yeah, a buyer's agent helps me a lot for that, because you're right. Sometimes you got to play the poker face. Sometimes, you've just got to give them the information they need to. And yeah, but staying on the client side is really helpful there. Obviously, the industry is sort of changing a lot. When you look back on when you started to where you are now, do you think you're a much better buyer's agent now than when you were, say, 5 years ago and 10 years ago? And, what's some of the things you probably do today that you didn't do in your early days when you were a buyer's agent?
Yeah, well, I think you're too arrogant if you think you know it all. And it's been a learning curve from day one, and you're always learning. And I think you need to adapt to your environment. And, you're learning on the way, you're picking up different information from different agents. You're working out how they all work and how they tick, and, the different personalities in real estate. I'm a kind of person, you can dress me up or dress me down. I like to adapt to the clients and the agents. And I think that's something that has probably played in my part, trying to get access into, back in the day, to old survey houses in Jefferson Lane on the dry side. No one could get in, but my Melbourne client really wanted to buy the property, and I said, I've got to get in and have a look at it. So I had 3-4 days growth at the time, wore my board shorts, and I said to the agent, can I just knock on the door and have a chat to these fellas? And I had a chat to them, and before he knew it, I was up there in their kitchen looking around and having a good scope. And we won that auction, and we paid $690,000 for 2 houses in Jefferson Lane Dry. It was awesome. But yeah, learning along the way. Doesn't matter how many transactions you have undertaken in the past, you're only as good as your last transaction. And don't take yourself too seriously. Don't get too arrogant. be true to yourself, be grounded, and you'll be a lot more likable and a lot more well received as you mature in this business. And yeah, it's treat everyone with respect.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of those jobs where it's same as what we do, to be honest, the advice broking side. It's part bank, but it's part the advice around the decision making. And you got to constantly be, learning and checking and making sure your clients are doing the right thing. And could there anything better they're doing? And, taking new information in. I mean, the Gold Coast market, obviously you mentioned there's 30-something cranes in the air. And to be honest, it's a very high level, high-end product ability. I mean, what are these going for? They're going for anything for 5 to 15 million, these apartments often. And so there's very high-end product they're building, and obviously got all the old apartment stock. So, how is that sort of shifting the Gold Coast market, like another little bit of a property boom? And, is there any other major things that are, obviously the light rail, some changes around that? Is there any other major things that are changing in the Gold Coast market that, are sort of affecting how you're going about things?
Yeah, you can't stop progress, and it's great to see so many cranes in the air. One thing I have learnt, and I never thought this would ever happen, that units would supersede the capital growth of houses in a couple of quarters over the last couple of years. So there's been a big drive towards apartment living. And again, you need to adapt to your environment and what people want. 3-bedroom apartments is super, super popular, and people are willing to pay for them. Your rates per square metre from the northern end of the coast to the southern end of the coast can range from $7,000 or $8,000 to $30,000 a square metre and climbing. Who would have thought that would ever happen? But once there's a trend of people that are buying in these areas that are lock and leaves, they're people that are downsizing, they don't want to live in their big homes anymore. They want to have more of a lifestyle, travel, come and go, no maintenance. Don't have to worry about the pool. The grandchildren can run around the tennis court or whatever it might be. So the Gold Coast has matured in a lot of ways. And, the G-Link, that's been a phenomenal, addition to the Gold Coast, linking Brisbane, the Helensvale station, all the way through to Broadbeach and then Burleigh Heads, only a matter of months. So that has been phenomenal. I think they've had 85 million passengers on the G-Link since it first opened. Coomera Connector is the next biggest one. Are they calling that the M9? Spending $3.5 billion on that infrastructure is awesome for the Gold Coast. Not so great for the ones that are living right next to it. But these properties do sell. It's price reflective and, they just have stunted growth, that's all. So a new 4-lane highway is very welcome to the Gold Coast from the northern end, connecting Coomera to Nerang. So that's phenomenal. It was only last month that Pimpamar train station opened up as well. So we never used to buy out at Pimpamar, but it is absolutely coming of age. There's so much infrastructure. Again, you need to move with the environment, and if you don't, you get left behind. So you've got to keep up with the trends and what people want. They're holding their values and they're going up. People that might be working in Brisbane or the Gold Coast that, might want to buy a property both in the middle there. You might have a husband or a wife that works in either city. So it's a good alternative for them. The university hospital used to be the biggest structure. That was huge and phenomenal, and the Gold Coast grew with that. But now we've got another 600-bed hospital coming our way. And, the Gold Coast is forward-thinking. They secured that site 20 years ago, and it's going to be ultimately completed in around that 2028 mark. So, yeah, I think Gold Coast, thankfully, has been ahead of the curve when it comes to infrastructure. Thankfully, we're an ever-growing city. And, I welcome everybody that wants to move here and enjoy the lifestyle. We help a lot of Kiwis too. It's a phenomenal community.
There's just so much going on in the Gold Coast. I think it's just one of the fast-growing parts of the country, and it's always had the interstate migration, people going for the better life in retirement. But I think it's more than that nowadays. I think a lot of families are moving up there. It's a alternative to, say, moving into Brisbane, and it's particularly with the airport, and there's a lot of ability to even get access to Brisbane. I mean, you're finding being so close to Brisbane, it's you do find a bit of wealth there. The people who do, let's say they have the ability to do the commute, a few days a week, and they sort of want that water life. It's sort of, they've got the city job, but then they can still live on the Gold Coast. It's a viable option, particularly now freeways are getting better. Is that something that the Gold Coast sort of property market is sort of piggybacking off in some way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have our sister city there, Brisbane, not so far away. And We have clients, a number of clients that live and reside on the Gold Coast to enjoy and embrace that lifestyle that they love, enjoying the beaches or the broadwaters or having their boat parked out the front so they can go fishing for the weekend or jump on the jet ski with the kids. So lifestyle is a big part of their life, and work in the city of Brisbane is a way to support that lifestyle.
Thanks so much for coming on, Tony. Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.